Don't trust your nurse. The shout came from a 7-year-old girl standing in the doorway of the hospital's most expensive private room. Her name was Lily and she was shaking, but her voice was loud and clear. She pointed a small, trembling finger at the woman by the bed. The man in the bed, Mr. Blackwood, was a paralyzed millionaire who hadn't moved his body in a year. But his eyes snapped wide open. He stared at the little girl, then at the smiling woman who was his nurse. Nurse Sarah held a syringe, the needle gleaming. Her sweet smile, the one that had charmed every doctor and visitor, didn't fall, but it seemed to crack. "Now what's all this shouting about?" she asked, her voice like warm honey. Lily saw the needle. She knew what was in it. It wasn't medicine. It was a secret. A bad one. Before anyone could stop her, she ran. Not away but straight toward the nurse. With a small cry, she slammed into Nurse Sarah's arm. The syringe flew through the air, hitting the far wall with a small click and spraying its clear liquid across the floor. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Sarah's smile vanished. Her face became a terrifying, cold mask of fury. She grabbed Lily's arm, her fingers digging in like claws. "You have no idea what you've just done," Sarah hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You are going to wish you had never been born." Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you want to find out what happens to Lily, subscribe to our channel. Just 1 month earlier, no one would have believed this was possible. Mr. Richard Blackwood was a genius who had built a billion-dollar tech company with his inventions. But a terrible lab accident had broken his spine, trapping his brilliant mind inside a body that couldn't move. He was paralyzed from the neck down, able to do nothing but watch the world through his window and speak in soft whispers. To take care of him, the hospital had assigned him the best private nurse they had. Sarah. Nurse Sarah was perfect. Too perfect. She was always cheerful, always gentle. She managed everything for Mr. Blackwood. His meals, his medicine, and especially his visitors. She would tell his business partners he was too tired to talk. She would tell his old friends that he needed absolute quiet to recover. Soon no one came to visit anymore. It was just Richard Blackwood and his angel, Nurse Sarah. But he wasn't recovering. He was getting weaker. His mind felt foggy and terrifying nightmares haunted his sleep. The doctors were stumped. They ran test after test but found nothing wrong. "He's just depressed," they would say. "It's understandable." Sarah would nod sadly. The poor man. "I'm doing my best." What she never told them was that her best was a lie. Her best was a small, dark brown bottle she kept hidden in her uniform pocket. No one knew she was there, but someone was always watching. Lily? Lily was an orphan who lived in the children's home next door. Her secret escape was the hospital garden, and Mr. Blackwood's ground floor room had a large window that overlooked her favorite patch of roses. She'd often see him lying in his bed, looking out the window with the saddest eyes she had ever seen. So she started leaving him gifts. A pretty feather. A smooth gray stone. A drawing of a smiling dog. She would place them on his windowsill when no one was looking, and the next day they would be gone. It was their secret friendship. Because of this secret, Lily saw things. She saw Nurse Sarah talking on her phone in the garden, her face twisted with anger. Lily hid behind a bush and heard her whisper, "The will? It's taking too long. I have to finish it soon." Lily didn't know what a will was, but she knew the words "finish it" sounded scary when paired with that angry face. The next day she saw the proof. She watched as Nurse Sarah prepared Mr. Blackwood's 4-bag, the clear pouch that dripped fluid into his arm. When the nurse thought no one was looking, she pulled out the little brown bottle. With a quick, sneaky glance around, she used a needle to add a few drops of the dark liquid into the bag. Lily's blood went cold. It was a secret. A bad secret. You don't hide medicine if it's meant to help someone. Things got worse a week later. Lily was in the garden when Mr. Blackwood's main doctor came into the room. Lily crept close to the open window to listen. "His heart is getting weaker, Sarah," the doctor said, his voice heavy with worry. "I don't know why, but his body is starting to shut down. I've prescribed a new medication. It's a very strong heart stimulant. It might be our last chance to pull him out of this." "Of course, doctor," Sarah said, her voice full of fake concern. "I'll give it to him right away." But as soon as the doctor left, Lily watched in horror as Sarah took the new life-saving medicine from the tray. She walked calmly over to the red medical waste bin and dropped it inside. It was gone. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the little brown bottle. Lily understood everything in that terrible moment. The nurse wasn't trying to save him. She was the reason he was sick. She was the reason he was getting weaker. And now, she was going to give him the poison instead of the medicine that could save his life. She watched as Sarah carefully filled the syringe with the clear liquid from the bottle. The nurse smiled, a real smile this time, thin and cruel. She turned and walked toward Mr. Blackwood's bed, the needle held up like a weapon. Lily's heart hammered in her chest. There was no time to get help. No time to tell anyone. By the time someone believed her, it would be too late. The sad man in the window, her secret friend, would be gone forever. Fear told her to run, to hide. But her heart screamed at her to act. She scrambled out from behind the bushes, dirt smudging her cheek. Her small legs pumped as fast as they could, carrying her out of the garden and through a nearby hospital door. The clean, quiet hallway was a blur. All she could see was the door to his room. All she could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart. She didn't slow down. She didn't hesitate. She burst through the door, ready to scream the words that would change everything. Nurse Sarah's words were a cold promise, and her fingers felt like steel bands on Lily's arm. Fear, sharp and icy, shot through Lily's body. For a split second, she was just a scared little girl again, trapped by a monster. But then she saw Mr. Blackwood's eyes. They were wide, locked on Sarah's hand, and filled with a horror that gave Lily a surge of courage. He knew she was telling the truth. Fueled by a wild burst of adrenaline, Lily fought back. She lifted her worn-out sneaker and stomped down on Sarah's polished white shoe with all her might. "Yo!" Sarah yelped, a sharp cry of pain. Her grip loosened for just an instant, but it was enough. In that single moment, Mr. Blackwood did something he hadn't done in a year. He gathered every bit of air in his lungs and forced it out in a raw, desperate shout that was more of a croak than a word, but it was loud. "Help!" The sound was a shock. Sarah froze, stunned that her weak, silent patient could make such a noise. She lunged to cover his mouth, but it was too late. His cry had already escaped the room. The door flew open. Dr. Evans stood there, his face a mixture of confusion and alarm. He took in the chaotic scene in an instant. Sarah half bent over the bed, Lily pressed against the wall looking terrified, and a syringe lying in a puddle of clear liquid on the floor. "What is happening in here?" the doctor demanded, his voice booming. Sarah immediately changed. The furious monster vanished, and the professional victim appeared. Her face crumpled and tears welled in her eyes. "Doctor, thank heavens!" she cried, rushing toward him. "This little girl, she's disturbed. She ran in here like a wild animal and attacked me. She knocked the syringe out of my hand, Mr. Blackwood's heart medication." She pointed a shaking finger at Lily, expertly painting herself as the hero trying to protect her patient from a crazy intruder. Dr. Evans's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lily. He saw a small, dirty child, breathing heavily with a wild look in her eyes. His instinct was to trust his calm, professional colleague. "Young lady," he said sternly, "you have some explaining to do." Lily felt a wave of despair. He didn't believe her. It wasn't working. But she couldn't give up. Not now. "She's lying," Lily shouted, her voice trembling but full of passion. "That's not the real medicine. I saw her. She threw the real medicine in the trash can. That syringe is full of stuff from her secret bottle." The doctor frowned. "Secret bottle? That's a serious accusation. What are you talking about?" Sarah let out a sound that was supposed to be a laugh, but it came out shaky. "She's clearly delusional, doctor. Making up stories. There is no secret bottle." She almost had him convinced. The doctor was starting to look at Lily with pity, as if she were a sick child who needed help. But then a quiet voice whispered from the bed. "Her pocket." The two words were quiet, but they landed like a thunderclap. It wasn't a random shout from a confused girl. It was a specific accusation from the patient himself. Dr. Evans's head snapped toward Mr. Blackwood. The millionaire's eyes were locked on his nurse, and there was no confusion in them, only a cold, burning certainty. Slowly, the doctor turned his gaze back to Sarah. He saw it then, a flicker of pure, animal panic in her eyes before she could hide it. He saw the way her hand subconsciously moved to press against the side of her uniform, as if to shield something hidden there. Everything clicked into place for Dr. Evans. Mr. Blackwood's mysterious decline, the test that showed nothing, the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It hadn't been a medical issue. It had been a person. His friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a cold, professional authority. He took one deliberate step toward Nurse Sarah, blocking her path to the door. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a command that could not be refused. "Sarah, show me what's in your pocket." The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Nurse Sarah stood frozen, trapped by the doctor's command. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted from Dr. Evans's stone-cold face to Mr. Blackwood's knowing stare, and finally to the small girl who had destroyed everything. Her mind raced. If they found the bottle, it was over. Prison. The end of her plan. The end of her revenge. She was a cornered animal, and cornered animals don't surrender. They bite. With a wild cry of desperation, Sarah lunged, not for her pocket, but for the heavy stainless steel water pitcher on the bedside table. She swung the metal container in a vicious arc straight at Dr. Evans's head. The doctor, shocked by her sudden violence, stumbled backward just in time. The pitcher whistled past his ear and crashed into the wall with a deafening bang, leaving a dent in the plaster. The attack gave her a few precious seconds. The sweet, caring nurse was gone forever, replaced by a creature of pure hate. She turned her venomous glare on the man in the bed. "You," she spat, her voice dripping with poison. "You think you've won? You couldn't even move a finger to save yourself. For months I've watched you grow weaker, and every second of it made me happy. My family lost everything because of men like you, and I wanted you to feel that. To be helpless. To know you are completely alone while the person you trust the most is slowly killing you." The brutal confession struck Mr. Blackwood harder than any physical blow. The last sliver of doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, sickening certainty. Every kind word she had ever spoken, every gentle touch, was a lie. He had been a fool, her willing victim. A white-hot rage, pure and absolute, burned through the fog in his mind, but his body remained a useless prison. All he could do was lie there and absorb the full weight of her betrayal. Seeing the raw hate in Sarah's eyes, Lily reacted. While the nurse was lost in her tirade, Lily scrambled to the wall and slammed her small hand on the big red emergency alarm button. Beep, beep, beep. The piercing sound of the alarm shattered the tension. It was a beacon calling for help. Sarah's head snapped toward the sound, her eyes widening in renewed panic. She could hear footsteps pounding down the hall. Security was coming. She was out of time. Dr. Evans saw his chance and moved to grab her. But Sarah was too fast. She shoved a medical cart into his path, sending instruments clattering to the floor. She ignored the doctor, ignored the rich man in the bed. Her eyes locked on her real target, the one who had truly beaten her. She lunged for Lily. Before Lily could even scream, Sarah's arm wrapped around her chest, pulling her backward. The hospital room door burst open, and two security guards rushed in, stopping dead at the scene before them. Sarah held the terrified girl in front of her like a shield. In her free hand, she now held a pair of long, sharp surgical scissors she had snatched from the cart. She pressed the gleaming point against the soft skin of Lily's throat. "Everybody back up." Sarah screamed, her voice a raw shriek of terror and rage. "Get back or I swear I'll do it. Don't think I won't." The two security guards stood frozen in the doorway, their hands half raised. The scene was a nightmare, the hospital star nurse holding a pair of scissors to a little girl's throat. Lily could feel the cold, sharp point against her skin. A single tear traced a path through the dirt on her cheek. She was so scared she couldn't even breathe. All she could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart and Sarah's ragged breathing in her ear. "I said get back," Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. "I want a car waiting at the front entrance and a clear path out of here or she dies. I mean it." The head guard, a large man named Frank, took a slow, careful step into the room. "Okay, ma'am. Okay. We can talk about that. Just stay calm. Nobody needs to get hurt here." "I'm not calming down," she shrieked, pressing the scissors just a little harder against Lily's neck. Lily let out a small whimper of pain. Suddenly, a quiet voice came from the bed. A whisper. "Sarah." It was Mr. Blackwood. Every eye turned to him. "Sarah, I'll let her go," he whispered, his voice raspy with effort. Dr. Evans, standing near his head, repeated his words louder for the guards. "He says, let her go." Mr. Blackwood continued, his eyes locked on his nurse. "Tell them. I was confused. That the girl is lying. I'll protect you." Everyone in the room stared in disbelief. Frank, the guard, looked at the doctor, confused. Sarah just stared, her frantic mind trying to process his words. Was this a trick? "I'll give you the money," Mr. Blackwood whispered, the words coming faster now. "Everything you wanted. $1 million. Just don't hurt the child. Let her go, and you can walk out of here a rich woman." The room was silent. The offer was insane. It was a lifeline Sarah never expected. She could see the greed warring with the panic in her eyes. $1 million. Freedom. It was everything she had wanted. For a moment, her grip on Lily loosened almost imperceptibly. She was thinking about it. She was actually considering it. In that small moment of hesitation, a tiny, trembling voice spoke up from the center of the chaos. "You don't have to be a monster." It was Lily. She wasn't looking at the guards or the doctor. She was tilting her head back slightly, trying to look at the woman who was holding her hostage. "My mama always told me," Lily whispered, her voice shaking but clear, "that monsters are just people who are really, really sad inside." The simple, innocent words struck Sarah harder than any threat could have. She flinched as if she'd been slapped. A child she was about to kill was not screaming or fighting, but was trying to understand her. For the first time, a flicker of something other than rage or fear crossed Sarah's face. It looked like shame. Her hand trembled. The point of the scissors wavered, moving away from Lily's skin for less than a second. It was the only opening they were going to get. Frank, the head guard, saw it. He didn't hesitate. He lunged. The room exploded into motion. A scream, sharp and terrified, ripped through the air as the guard crashed into Sarah and the little girl. It was Sarah's scream. Frank, the guard, moved with a speed that was shocking for a man his size. He didn't tackle them. He attacked the weapon. His large hand clamped around Sarah's wrist like a vice, twisting it hard. The scissors escaped her grasp and clattered harmlessly onto the tiled floor. At the same time, the second guard lunged forward, expertly pulling Lily out of the chaos and shielding her with his own body. Freed from her hostage, Sarah fought with the strength of pure desperation, kicking and scratching. But it was useless. Frank pinned her against the wall while his partner helped restrain her. Within seconds, the fight was over. The click of handcuffs locking around Sarah's wrists was the loudest sound in the now quiet room. The immediate danger had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by Sarah's angry sobs and Lily's quiet, shaky breaths. Dr. Evans rushed to the little girl. "Lily, are you hurt? Let me see." He gently tilted her head, examining her neck. There was an angry red mark where the scissors had pressed, but her skin wasn't broken. Lily was too overwhelmed to speak. She just shook her head and clung to the guard who had saved her, burying her face in his uniform. From the bed, Mr. Blackwood had watched the entire violent struggle, his heart hammering in his chest. He had been powerless to help, a spectator in a fight for a child's life. Now, seeing Lily was safe, a wave of relief so powerful it almost made him dizzy washed over him. It was followed by a deep, burning gratitude for the little girl who had done what he could not. She had fought for him. "Lily," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Are you okay?" Hearing his voice, Lily wiggled free from the safety of the guard's arms. She walked across the room, past the defeated nurse and the concerned doctor, right up to his bedside. She reached out and placed her small, warm hand on top of his large, motionless one. It was the first time they had ever touched. "I'm okay, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, looking at him with her big, honest eyes. "She can't hurt you anymore." As the guards began to haul a spitting, struggling Sarah out of the room, Dr. Evans's mind was already racing ahead. The criminal was caught, but his patient was still in danger. During the struggle, the small brown bottle had fallen from Sarah's pocket and rolled under the bed. The doctor retrieved it, holding it up to the light. The label was scratched off. He turned to his patient, his voice now filled with a new, clinical urgency. "Richard, we have to move you. No. I'm taking you to the intensive care unit. We have no idea what's in this bottle, how much she gave you, or what damage it has done. We need to run a full toxicology screen on your blood immediately." Mr. Blackwood looked at him, his mind still reeling from the emotional whiplash of the last 10 minutes. He was exhausted. But Dr. Evans wasn't finished. A wild, almost unthinkable idea was blooming in his mind, a thought connected to a puzzle that had bothered him for a year. "Richard, your paralysis," the doctor said, speaking faster now. "The way you never recovered any feeling, the way your muscles grew weaker instead of stronger, it never made medical sense. We blamed it on the severity of the initial injury. He held up the bottle. But what if it wasn't just the accident? What if this poison has been preventing your nerves from healing this whole time? The doctor's words hung in the air, electric with possibility. It was a crazy idea. A long shot. But for the first time in a year, it was something more than a grim diagnosis. It was hope. Mr. Blackwood stared at his doctor, the question he had buried long ago now clawing its way back to the surface, showing in the desperate, terrified light in his eyes. Is there a chance? Hours later, the world was a quiet mix of beeps and hums in the sterile white room of the intensive care unit. Mr. Blackwood had been moved, and now even more machines with blinking lights stood guard around his bed. In a chair pulled close, Lily was curled up, fast asleep. A kind social worker had brought her a blanket, but Lily had refused to go anywhere. She was staying with her friend. The door slid open and Dr. Evans walked in. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright with an intensity Mr. Blackwood hadn't seen before. He was holding a tablet computer, its screen glowing with charts and data. "Richard," the doctor began, his voice low but clear. "We got the lab results back. We know what she was giving you." Mr. Blackwood's heart, which had just started to calm down, began to beat faster. This was it. The answer. It wasn't a simple poison, Dr. Evans explained, pulling up a complex chemical diagram on the screen. It was a custom-designed drug. A neurosuppressant. It's a cocktail, a mix of a powerful, long-acting muscle relaxant and an agent that blocks nerve signals. He leaned closer, simplifying the science. Think of your nervous system as the electrical wiring for your body. The accident a year ago was like a lightning strike that cut some of those wires in your spine. But this drug she gave you, it was like someone poured thick, sticky oil over the entire circuit board. It didn't just stop the broken wires from working, it stopped all the wires from sending messages. He paused, letting the information sink in. That's why you felt so foggy and weak. That's why your muscles never responded. The drug was actively preventing your brain from communicating with your body. It tricked us, and it tricked your own body, into believing the damage was 100% complete. Mr. Blackwood listened, his mind racing. It all made a horrible kind of sense. "Here's the most important part, Richard," the doctor said, his voice filled with a gravity that made Mr. Blackwood hold his breath. "The drug is a nerve blocker, not a nerve killer. It didn't cause permanent damage. It just put your nervous system to sleep. Now that we know what it is, we can begin the process of flushing it out of your system." A wave of something dizzying and unfamiliar washed over Mr. Blackwood. It wasn't just relief. It was a terrifying, fragile thing. Hope. Dr. Evans saw the look in his patient's eyes and raised a hand cautiously. "Now this is not a magic wand. This will be the hardest fight of your life. Your muscles have atrophied. They've wasted away from a year of total disuse. It will take months, maybe years, of grueling physical therapy just to see any results. You will essentially have to learn to command your body all over again from scratch." He took a deep breath before delivering the final piece of information. "But, we did a new high-resolution scan of your spine about an hour ago. Without the drug interfering, we can see things we couldn't before. The original injury was severe, but it was not a complete severing of the spinal cord. There are still intact neural pathways. Richard, there is a genuine medical possibility that with therapy you could regain some movement." The news was too big. It was like being told the sky was a different color than he'd always believed. The idea of fighting, of trying and possibly failing after all this hope, was overwhelming. Lily stirred in her sleep and then her eyes fluttered open, as if she could feel the tension in the room. She saw the look on Mr. Blackwood's face and seemed to understand. She slid off the chair, walked to the bed and once again placed her small hand on his. "See," she whispered. "The fight's not over." Before Mr. Blackwood could even process her words, the door to the ICU room slid open again. It wasn't a nurse this time. It was two people in dark suits. A woman with a detective's badge and a man Mr. Blackwood recognized instantly. It was John, the lead lawyer for his company. "Mr. Blackwood, forgive the intrusion," the detective said gently. "I'm Detective Miller. We have Sarah Wells in custody and she's talking. A lot. She's confessed to the assault and poisoning, but she also mentioned some things about your business." John the lawyer stepped forward, his face grim. "Richard, we've been running an emergency audit for the last few hours. The bank flagged some major transfers a while back that Sarah, using her power of attorney, had explained away. They're not just simple thefts. He looked deeply troubled. Richard, she wasn't just stealing your money. She's been selling off your proprietary patents. The core of our new energy project. She sold it to a competitor. It looks like she wasn't working alone. The hope that had just bloomed in the room was instantly chilled by a new, colder reality. Mr. Blackwood had been fighting a snake in his room, but the real threat was a dragon trying to burn down his entire kingdom. He now had to fight for his life, not just physically, but for the very legacy he had spent his life building. The news landed like a second explosion, shattering the fragile hope that had just filled the room. Mr. Blackwood wasn't just a victim of one person's hate. He was a target in a much larger, colder game. His life's work, the ideas he had spent decades building, the very core of his legacy, was being stolen and sold by his greatest rival. A new kind of energy surged through him, an emotion he hadn't truly felt in a year, cold, clear anger. It burned away the last of his mental fog. He was a prisoner in his own body, but his mind was now a weapon, and he was ready to use it. He focused all his effort and pushed a single sharp question from his lips. Which competitor? John the lawyer didn't hesitate. Titan Dynamics, he said, the name tasting like poison. Your old rival Marcus Thorne. Of course. It had to be Thorne. A man with no imagination of his own, who had spent his career trying to copy or steal what Mr. Blackwood could create. The room was no longer a place of healing, it was a war room. Sarah is talking, Detective Miller said, stepping forward. But she's trying to protect her contact. She claims she was paid by a consultant for industrial research. It's a weak story. To build a real criminal case against Titan Dynamics, we need to prove they hired her. We need to find out who that consultant really was. And we need to move fast, John the lawyer added, his tone urgent. They are pushing the patent transfer through on an accelerated timeline. They're using Sarah's power of attorney to claim it's all legal. We have to file an emergency injunction to freeze the sale, but they will fight it. We'll have to prove in court that you were not of sound mind when she signed the papers. A case made much harder by the fact that she was the one poisoning you into that state. Dr. Evans suddenly interrupted, his protective instinct kicking in. Gentlemen, stop. Look at him. My patient has just been through a horrific ordeal. He cannot handle the stress of a corporate war right now. His focus needs to be 100% on his physical recovery. No. The whisper was quiet, but it had the force of a command. Everyone stopped and looked at Mr. Blackwood. We fight, he whispered, his eyes moving from the detective to the lawyer. Now. He was back in charge. He looked at John. File the injunction. Spare no expense. Then his eyes shifted to the detective. Find the contact. Check all of Sarah's finances. The money leads to him. The two professionals stood in stunned silence for a moment, impressed by the clarity and strength of his commands. He may have been paralyzed, but the mind of the genius inventor was firing on all cylinders. They both nodded, a new sense of purpose on their faces. We're on it, Richard, John said before he and the detective quickly left the room to begin their work. The room was quiet again. The weight of the two battles ahead, one for his body, one for his company, settled over Mr. Blackwood. For a moment it felt like too much. How could he fight a corporate giant from a hospital bed? How could he endure grueling therapy while his legacy was being dismantled? Lily, who had been listening to the grown-ups talk, slid off her chair. She seemed to understand his silent struggle. She looked up at him and asked a simple question. Are you going to build things again? The question cut through all the noise of lawyers and police. It reminded him of who he was. Not a patient. Not a victim. He was a builder. An inventor. That's what Thorne could never be, and that was why he had to steal. A flicker of his old self, the confident genius, returned. Yes, Lily, he whispered. I am. Dr. Evans, who had been watching the exchange, came back to the bedside. Good, he said with a firm nod. Because the first step in that fight starts right now. He held up a small electronic pad with a wire attached to it. We've flushed enough of the poison out of your system to see if the lines of communication are open. I'm going to attach this electrode to your hand. It will send a tiny, painless electrical current to stimulate the nerve endings. He gently placed the pad on the back of Mr. Blackwood's motionless right hand. "This might do nothing at all," the doctor warned. "But I need you to try. I want you to focus all your energy, all that anger you're feeling, everything you have, on this one simple task. I want you to try to make a fist." Mr. Blackwood closed his eyes. He imagined Marcus Thorne's smug face. He thought of Sarah's betrayal. He channeled all of it, the rage, the frustration, the new terrifying spark of hope, and sent it like a lightning bolt down his arm, screaming at his hand to move, to clench, to do something. Dr. Evans turned on the machine. He, Mr. Blackwood, and Lily, now awake and watching, all stared intently at the lifeless hand lying on the white hospital sheet. Nothing happened. The hand remained still, a pale and useless thing. But on the monitor beside the bed, a small green line that measured nerve activity, a line that had been flat for an entire year, suddenly twitched. It jumped. They all stared at the monitor. The tiny green line jumped again. It was a weak signal, a flicker, but it was there. Mr. Blackwood's brain was sending a command, and for the first time in a year, some part of his body was receiving it. His hand didn't move, but the message had arrived. "That's it," Dr. Evans said, his voice sharp with excitement. "That's a synaptic response. Your brain is talking to your nerves, Richard. The connection isn't dead." A fire ignited in Mr. Blackwood's chest. It was real. This wasn't false hope. It was a start. Again, Dr. Evans commanded. "Do it again. Focus." Mr. Blackwood closed his eyes and tried again, pushing his will down his arm. He pictured his fist closing. He imagined picking up a tool, drawing a blueprint. The mental effort was immense. A sheen of sweat broke out on his forehead. The line on the monitor jumped, stronger this time. But his hand remained open and still. "Again," the doctor said. He tried again. And again. For nearly an hour they worked. Mr. Blackwood strained until his head pounded, sending command after command to a hand that would not listen. The frustration was a bitter taste in his mouth. The signal was there, but the bridge between the nerve and the muscle was broken from a year of silence. It was like shouting across a canyon and only hearing the faintest echo back. He felt a wave of exhaustion and despair. What if this was it? What if a jumping line on a screen was all he would ever get back? He must have made a sound, a quiet sigh of frustration, because Lily moved. She slid from her chair and gently placed her tiny hand inside his motionless one. Her fingers were warm. "Squeeze my hand, Mr. Blackwood," she whispered. Her words gave him a new focus. It wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about a competitor or a nurse. It was about the little girl who had saved his life. He looked at her small hand resting in his and focused all of his being on that single, simple task. Squeeze. The green line on the monitor didn't just jump. It spiked. At that exact moment, the door slid open. It was his lawyer, John, and he looked worried. "Richard, I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, walking quickly into the room. "But you need to see this. Titan Dynamics just responded to our injunction." Dr. Evans looked annoyed by the interruption. "John, he needs to rest." "He can't rest," John said, his face grim. "They aren't just denying our claim. They're countersuing." Mr. Blackwood turned his attention from his hand to his lawyer. He knew what a countersuit meant. It was an attack. John held up a tablet with a legal document on it. "They are filing a motion to have you declared mentally incompetent. They're petitioning the court to have a third party take control of your assets and your company until you recover." Dr. Evans scoffed. "That's insane." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of your own nurse's medical notes," John said, delivering the final, devastating blow. "They are using the notes Sarah kept for the past year. The notes where she detailed your bouts of confusion, your delusions, and your inability to communicate clearly. They are using the symptoms of the very poison she was giving you as proof that you are mentally unfit to make your own decisions." The lawyer's words hung in the room, colder and more poisonous than anything Sarah had put in the forebag. They weren't just trying to steal his company. They were trying to steal his mind. To legally erase Richard Blackwood and turn him into a non-person, a ghost whose assets could be picked apart by vultures. Dr. Evans was furious. "That's fraud. Those notes were written under false pretenses to cover up a crime. They are worthless as evidence." "To us, they're worthless," John the lawyer countered, his voice tight with frustration. But in a courtroom they are official medical records signed by his state-approved caregiver. It's enough for Titan Dynamics to file the motion and bury us in legal challenges. They don't need to win, they just need to stall. They want to tie us up in a competency hearing for the next 6 months while their purchase of your patents becomes final. The strategy was brilliant and brutal. They were using Sarah's crime as their weapon. Mr. Blackwood listened, his newfound anger becoming a sharp, cold focus. He ignored the legal arguments. He needed to know the timeline of the battle. He pushed the words out. How long? John checked his watch as if the minutes were already slipping away. The preliminary hearing on the competency motion is set for this Friday. Today is Sunday. We have 5 days to present the judge with undeniable proof that you are mentally sound and on the road to recovery. A doctor's testimony is good, but they'll say he's biased. That twitch on the monitor isn't enough. We need something more. Something physical. Something a judge can see with his own eyes. 5 days. The deadline was impossible. He needed to achieve in 5 days what should have taken months. That's medically reckless. Dr. Evans protested. He needs to recover slowly. Pushing him this hard could cause a serious setback. I don't have a choice, Mr. Blackwood whispered, his gaze fixed on his motionless hand. Lily's small fingers were still wrapped around his. He had to fight for her. He had to fight for himself. He looked at the doctor, his eyes burning with an intensity that left no room for argument. No, rest. We work. And so the work began. The ICU room was converted into a round-the-clock rehabilitation center. A team of the best physical therapists in the country was flown in. For 4 days they worked on him, pushing him to his absolute physical and mental limits. He spent every waking moment focused on one single task, sending the same command from his brain to his right hand over and over, until his mind was raw with the effort. It was now Thursday night, less than 12 hours before the hearing. John came into the room carrying a video camera and a tripod. His face was grim. Richard, this is it, the lawyer said. The judge's clerk just called. Titan's lawyers have filed a mountain of paperwork. The judge is overwhelmed but has agreed to review a short video deposition from you first thing in the morning. This is our only chance to stop the hearing before it even begins. He set up the camera, pointing it directly at Mr. Blackwood's right hand. This is everything, Richard, John said, the pressure heavy in his voice. The red light on the camera started to blink. They were recording. Okay, Richard, Dr. Evans said softly, standing beside the bed. Just like we've been practicing. All that work, all that anger. Focus it right now. Show them you're still here. Mr. Blackwood stared at his hand. The world shrank until that one motionless part of him was all that existed. He shut out the sounds of the machines, the nervous breathing of his lawyer, everything. He thought of his company being sold. He thought of his name being erased. He thought of Lily. He sent the command. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The hand lay pale and still on the white sheet. John let out a quiet sigh, thinking they had failed. Then it happened. The index finger, almost too small to see at first, twitched. It wasn't a spasm. It was a deliberate movement. Then, slowly, painfully, the finger began to curl inward. A fraction of an inch at a time. Another finger followed, then another. It was a shaky, weak, and ugly motion, but it was happening. For the first time in over a year, Richard Blackwood was moving his hand. John the lawyer stared at the camera's small screen, his mouth hanging open. Dr. Evans let out a sharp, triumphant breath of air. The movement was small, a weak clenching of fingers, but it was the most powerful thing anyone in the room had ever seen. It was proof. It was a miracle. Mr. Blackwood let his hand fall limp, the effort having taken everything he had. He was completely exhausted, but beneath the fatigue was a feeling he hadn't had in a long, long time: victory. Lily, who had been watching with wide, unblinking eyes, broke the silence. You did it, she whispered. John finally moved, reaching out and pressing the stop record button. His hand was shaking. We have it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We have everything we need. The next morning, the video file was sent to the judge's chambers. The result was immediate and decisive. Less than an hour later, John called the hospital room. He was ecstatic. The judge had thrown out Titan Dynamics' motion to have Mr. Blackwood declared incompetent. She had dismissed it with prejudice, a legal term meaning they could never file such a motion again. She had also granted the injunction, freezing the illegal patent sale, and had launched an ethics investigation into Marcus Thorne's legal team for their malicious tactics. The war was not over, but the first and most critical battle had been won. Faced with the undeniable video proof of Mr. Blackwood's active recovery, the case against Titan Dynamics grew stronger by the day. Detective Miller's investigation quickly unraveled the money trail from Titan's offshore accounts to the consultant, who had hired Sarah. The conspiracy was exposed. 1 year later. The sound in the room was not the beep of a hospital monitor, but the quiet scratch of a pencil on a blueprint. Richard Blackwood stood at a tall drafting table, leaning slightly on a sleek, metallic cane. He was thinner and his movements were deliberate and slow, but he was standing. He was working. The past year had been a grueling marathon of painful physical therapy, but the tiny movement of his fingers had become the grip of a hand. The grip of a hand had become the strength in an arm. And the strength in an arm had helped him learn to stand, and then to walk all over again. At a desk nearby, an 8-year-old Lily was finishing her math homework. The hospital room had been replaced by a bright, sunny home, and the social workers had long since stopped visiting. The adoption had been finalized 6 months ago. She was his daughter. He was her dad. They were a family. "What are you building now?" she asked, looking up from her books. He smiled and pointed the pencil to the complex drawing on the table. "It's a new kind of neural brace," he explained. "It reads the brain's signals, even the weak ones, and helps the user's muscles respond. It's for people like me. To help them in their fight." His work was different now. It was still brilliant, but it was no longer about money or power. It was about giving back the one thing he had almost lost: hope. Lily looked at the hand he was drawing with, the one that had first moved that night in the hospital. It was scarred from the therapy and it still trembled sometimes, but it was strong. "Does it ever still hurt?" she asked, her voice soft. Richard stopped drawing. He looked at his hand, then he looked at the little girl who had saved him in every way a person could be saved. "Every day," he said honestly. "But it's a good kind of hurt now. It's the hurt that reminds me I'm strong enough to be here." He put his pencil down, reached over with that same hand, and gently ruffled her hair. "And it reminds me what's really worth fighting for."